I want to tell you about the upcoming Meltup. So this is a story about inflation, how it reaccelerates hard. So you know how we had the Great Recession? Well, I'll coin this event the Great Meltup, and it will happen. It is inevitable. So this story, it starts with the US government's, so the US federal government's national debt crisis. It's going to get worse. It's going to get exponentially worse. I wish I could describe it in a different way, but I've chosen my words wisely. Exponentially worse, and you could be the judge. Here's the US national debt over the past 100 years. This is coming directly from the government's website at the Treasury. So this is their most recent charts. However, we've already crossed 35 trillion in debt in 2024. As I said, look for yourself. It's become exponentially worse. This is where we're currently at. Again, this is from the US Treasury's website. The federal government is in 35 trillion in debt. The interest payments on this debt is, of course, a big concern. As the government accumulates more debt, the interest payments grows. So the government has to make interest payments to whoever they borrowed money from, whoever they owe money to. So that could be other countries. We're talking about Japan, China, the UK, etc. It could be the Federal Reserve, big financial institutions, big corporations, rich families, rich individuals, whoever has a US government bond. Now, I want to connect the dots for you. Why this is a crisis, why inflation will get worse, why the US government, why the US economy cannot afford a recession, and also why the government will choose hyperinflation rather than deflation. So I want everybody to know this so that they can be best prepared. The federal government's primary source of income is tax revenue, so just taxes. So the biggest income source is individual income taxes, then Social Security, Medicare taxes, followed by corporate taxes. So those other tiny little bubbles that you see, those are insignificant. Those are things like customs taxes, excise taxes, etc. It's really not enough to move the needle. So for fiscal year 2024, the US government has collected about $4.4 trillion. So that's essentially the government's income. So they're going to end the fiscal year around $5 trillion. But this is where we're at right now for the year, the fiscal year. Now, here's how much the government has spent so far this fiscal year, $6.3 trillion. So the government has overspent by $1.9 trillion, and they need to borrow the difference. Now, here's what the money is being spent on. So this is coming from the same website, the US Treasury. The top expense items are Social Security payments, then Medicare, then interest payments, then healthcare, national defense, income security, veterans benefits, education, etc. Now, I want you to take a real good look at this. The government is overspending by about $2 trillion currently, right? So where are we going to cut $2 trillion from? Take a good look. Who's going to get screwed over here? Now, this is also coming from the Treasury's website. So this is another problem. It says that as of August 2024, the government will spend over $1 trillion a year on interest payments over the next 12 months. So that's the current run rates. So the interest payments are accelerating. That means that there's going to be less money for other programs. So listen, this is one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve had to cut interest rates. Just think about it. For the full year, if the government's going to collect $5 trillion in income from taxes, right? So $5 trillion, and they're going to spend $1 trillion on interest payments. That's 20% of tax collections. So what's going to happen when that gets increased to 30%, 50%, 100%? It's just going to be, and this is unsustainable, and it's just getting worse. This is ridiculous. It's like a house of cards. So it's eventually going to collapse. However, by lowering interest rates, it just buys more time. It's a stalling technique. Now, some people are going to say that the US government, the Federal Reserve, they can just print the money, right? And I'll say that you are absolutely correct. Yes, they can. However, if they do that, if they print trillions of more dollars, you know what's going to happen. You know the consequences. That's going to skyrocket inflation. Now, I want you to look at the trajectory that we're on. The red line is government spending. The blue line is revenue. Again, mostly tax collections. If the government spends more than they make, then they need to borrow more money. And then the interest payments get bigger. So the dotted line in the middle, that's 2024. The projections are the government will continue to overspend. That's not surprising. And guess what? Last week, The government passed their CR, the government funding bill. There were no spending cuts, same old, same old. So listen, the situation is just gonna get worse. That is a given. And it doesn't matter who wins office, Trump or Harris, makes no difference. Trump is gonna overspend like crazy. Trump added a record amount of national debts, more than Obama. And look at the Biden-Harris combo. They're gonna do the same thing. They're gonna spend like crazy. They added a record amount of national debts, more than Trump. So the national debts, it doesn't matter who wins. It's gonna increase, and the interest payments will increase as well. Okay, now just think about this. Let's run this scenario where the federal government learns how to balance their budget. They cut spending. And okay, this is a joke, this is never gonna happen, but just think about it. If they cut spending, if they balance their budget, what would happen? The US economy would be thrown into a deep recession. You have to remember the US government, the federal government is the largest US employer. So what are they supposed to do? Massive layoffs and cut benefits all across the board? But listen, I really want you to think about that because the US cannot afford that. They cannot afford to have a deep recession or high unemployment. You know why? If there's a deep recession or high unemployment, then tax collections go down. And then that's gonna leave us in the same position, a big deficit, and then the government would have to borrow more money, the debt will keep going up, and the interest payments keep going up. So listen, in a deflationary environment, your pre-existing debts become more expensive to service. So it's just gonna make the situation worse. So listen, I'm basically saying that the US government really put everyone in a bad spot, a very difficult spot. That's the truth. They left us with no good options. So if you're thinking, what do you mean? How can you be in a position where there are no good options? Isn't that being pessimistic or negative? So I'll explain it to you like this. Just think about it like this. This is like the most straightforward way I could put it. Let's just say that you decide to make a very bad decision. Let's say that you decide to rob a bank. And in the process, all the police come and surround the bank. In that position, what are your options? Do you have any good options? No, they're all gonna be bad options. So those are the consequences to making a bad decision. I would say making a bad decision repeatedly. Now, I do want to tell you this because there's an idea. There's a concept that's circulating that will actually solve the national debt crisis and inflation. It's if there's a technological breakthrough that's gonna massively boost productivity. So people are hoping that it's gonna be AI, artificial intelligence, so that's gonna do the trick. That's your glimmer of hope, but still a long shot. So the best bad option that we have right now is to inflate, and that's gonna be the favored route because 2 reasons. So the first reason is because inflation makes it easier to keep up with the interest payments. And 2, inflation gives the elite class an advantage. The advantage is first access to money. Okay, so what's the lesson here? The lesson is that you must invest in financial assets. This is not to get rich. This is for your protection. This is just to keep up with inflation. So I'm telling you, inflation is gonna reaccelerate hard. Probably 2026 could be sooner. But that's gonna be the start of the great melt-up. So more and more people are gonna realize this, and I'm telling you, you have to get ahead of this. Now, for the average person, I'll give you some straightforward examples. One example would be buying a home as your primary residence. So there's all this talk about there, oh, is it better to buy or rent? I would say that if you're gonna live in a home for 3 years or more, you're gonna be much better off buying because just think about it. If you're gonna get a mortgage and inflation is running at 10%, 15%, then it's gonna be so much easier to pay off the mortgage. If you're renting and the landlords, if we're in that type of environment, what are they gonna do? They're gonna jack up the rents 15, 20, 25% a year, and you're gonna be at their mercy. For the average person, it's about getting invested in the stock market. Just ride the wave up. Again, it's not about you trying to get rich. It's about you not falling behind. If you can beat the real rate of inflation, that's great, but at least if you're just on par, at least your money, your savings, it's not falling behind. For the average person, it's about getting some gold, getting some silver, getting some commodities. You could do that physically, you can do that through the stock markets. So listen, I just want you to be aware of the situation. I'm just trying to keep people safe. The wealth inequality in the upcoming years, it's just gonna get much worse due to inflation. And I'm just trying to help as many people as possible. Thank you for the support. Please subscribe and wish you a very nice day. Take care.